Greetings folks, welcome back to the Seth Show, and for this My Thoughts On video, I will be sharing with you my thoughts on a very special book to me, a very endearing book, a very beautiful book, and that is Twice Freed. I just recently finished it. This is actually a required reading book for English base 1106 to 8, I think, or whatever it was for English basis 4th quarter grade 8. So yeah, actually the story behind this is when I was doing those spaces, they didn't have the book available, it was gone or something, so I wasn't able to read it then. So I just had to Google it, summary, and that's how I entered the paces. But now they have the book, I borrowed it, and I read it, I finished it in like a week. It's beautiful, it's pure beauty. So far, it's my favorite required reading book for all the English and literature paces thus far. Just beautiful. You know, all those Ace and Christie series, Summer Fun, Red Rag Riddle, Saved at Sea, God's Tribesman. This is my favorite amongst all of those. Now, I haven't read all of them, but out of the ones I have read, which are quite a few, this is my favorite thus far. The story is based on the book of Philemon. It's about Onesimus or whatever, however you want to pronounce it. He's basically the slave of Philemon, and it kind of expands from the original source. I'm not sure how much of this is fiction, how much of it is actual historical fact or biblical fact. There are characters from the Bible like Paul and of course Philemon. So it's very nice, it's a very interesting read, and it's a very beautiful book. Now let's start with the plot. Basically, Onesimus, that's how I pronounced it in my head when I was reading through this whole book, was Philemon's slave, and basically he meets a girl. But since he's a slave and she's a free woman, a free girl, he's like 15, she's 12, I think. And since he's a slave and she's free, they're incompatible. And he's just struggling with that because then his master, I forgot his name actually, Philemon's son, is kind of a douche to him. He mistreats him, he likes to show off that he's his boss. He shows off that he has more power than him, and this book does a fantastic job at establishing the dynamic between master and slave, free man and slave. It's just beautiful. It's told from Onesimus's perspective, so we understand his thoughts, we understand what he's thinking at the moment. Everything is told from his perspective. In a third-person way, and it's beautiful. You know, I love how he isn't like other characters that I've read who are just so perfect, who know everything that's good, who does the best possible thing. He actually does some pretty bad stuff, you know, because the whole point, another thing about this is that he isn't a Christian. He's heard of Christ, but he rejects him. He says, what kind of God is this who tells you to turn the other cheek when you're insulted, or who only preaches love instead of revenge, which is what he's really feeling because of what happens to him in the book. So he kind of rejects that. And it shows, you know, because he's still a sinner. He does some bad stuff. He has some pretty wicked thoughts here and there. And he actually, in the middle of the book, I forgot where, he does something quite terrible. It works out in the end, it becomes good, but it's a terrible deed, you know. There, in this parade, there's a thing, and then there's the temple, and then he shouts out something, and then this happens. I won't give anything away. It's just, ugh. When I was reading that, I was like, no, he's not gonna do that. He's not gonna do that. This is too wicked for an ACE sponsored book, but he does it. He repents later on, and it's beautiful. I just love his character. He's flawed, he's relatable, he's perfect in that way. The writing style of this book is very, very good. The pacing is kind of weird. Sometimes through in the span of 3 chapters. It'll all take place in the same day or night or in 2 days, while in another chapter, a whole week could pass by. Like, he goes on this trip, and then in just that chapter he goes here and then he goes to another place. So the pacing is kind of mixed, but after, I'd say, like a third of the book, or maybe even a quarter of the book, or maybe even a fifth of the book, you'll kind of get used to the pacing, and it's actually done very well. All the other characters, you can tell who's talking, basically. You know how it's said, like, this person said this, and then this person continued, and it gives out the names. This book doesn't really need to do that in a lot of the time, because you get to know the characters, you understand them, and just by reading what they're saying, you already understand who's saying it. You can already guess. And that's one of the things I really liked about this book. It was really well done. My tips for answering the English space is, because, you know, it'll tell you, okay, read chapters 1 to 2 of Twice Freed, and you'll read through it and then you'll try to answer the pace. But that's not really a good strategy. What you should do, you should read the questions beforehand. Read them ahead of time, and then just keep them in mind, or list them down somewhere or whatever, and then as you read through the book, you start answering. Not necessarily scanning, don't do that, because it's a great story. It would be a waste if you just scan it. Just keep the questions in mind and then read through it, so as you read through it, you'll be like, oh yeah, this is the answer to that question, and you'll be able to answer it more easily. At least those are my tips for you. That's what I kind of did, even though I was just reading the summary at the time. What else? The setting is very interesting. This is actually the first book that I've read where the setting is like ancient, not really ancient, but during the Roman times. So the early after Christ years, when the disciples were walking around spreading the gospel. And it's a very nice setting. It's very well done. It's very descriptive. The sensory details are fantastic. You can really paint a picture in your mind of what they're going through, or the places, or the city, and all the streets and everywhere. It's very well done, and I just love this. Now, when I was reading through it, here's a short story. When I read through I think it was chapter 4 or 5, the notion of Christ is introduced. And knowing that he's a slave, I just instantly thought, oh my gosh, Twice Freed. It's like the best title you could have for this kind of book. It's just pure beauty, in my opinion, pure beauty. Of course, every book has its flaws, and the flaws in this book aren't really too many. There are times when, in my opinion, like, they'll introduce 3 characters all at the same time, and then they'll start mentioning them throughout the chapter, and I'm like, wait, who's this again? Who's that again? It was kind of hard to keep up when they introduce a lot of characters and then they're instantly treated like you already know them. And besides that, I don't really have much criticisms about this book. Very well done, loved it. I recommend all my fellow ACE students to read this book. Even if you're not ACE, you should read through this book, because I got the ACE copy. Twice Freed, beautiful. Probably said these adjectives a million times already. Read through it. Don't just scan. Don't just read the summary. Read through the whole thing. Please, it's so good. It's so beautiful. And also, in a way, parang it gave me a new way to look at life. That's kind of exaggerated, but it's true in some effects. So, yeah, Twice Freed, very good. I'm actually in the process of reading through another book, another required reading book for ACE, and that is, actually, I won't tell you. Just know it was for English space, for English grade 8, I think. And yeah, I'll be doing a review on that later on. So thank you very much for watching. Hopefully this helped you in any way. Good luck if you're going through those spaces. Props to you if you actually read through this, and if you love the story, hate it, doesn't matter, it's worth reading. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.